Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hey, I'm Stephanie.
It's our science unit for the month of May. And, of course, people here in Taiwan excel at science and mathematics.
Yes.
So, of course, many of you are probably considering studying overseas or something like that to enhance your science education. So, hopefully, we can help you with that if you're going to study at a university in the U.S. or Canada or England or Australia or whatever. And so today we're going to be talking about chemistry, and particularly we're going to talk about the periodic table.
That's right. I bet everybody knows what that is if they've taken chemistry. That is that big chart that usually is on the wall in the science room or the science lab, and it has all those different chemical elements that have little names that you memorize, and then are tested on them on some future exam or test. I had chemistry in, let's see, was I in high school or junior high? I think I was in junior high. And the only thing I remember too much about chemistry is that I had a really cute teacher. I'll be honest, that's about all I remember because I don't really have a lot of interest in chemistry. But hopefully, our article here will help you have a new appreciation for it. It did for me. So, as we always do, guys, we're going to read through day one, and then we'll be back to talk about some of these terms and phrases.
Without the 118 chemical elements, absolutely nothing would exist. Of course, most of us see the periodic table as an academic headache, something to memorize ahead of our final chemistry exams. But as we mark 152 years since this remarkable creation, let's take a moment to understand the story behind this milestone of modern science. To trace the modern periodic table to its origins, we have to go back to the 1860s. This was the middle of a period of rapid scientific discovery, with 50 elements discovered during that century alone. Several chemists attempted to create a system for organizing the elements so that they could be studied and better understood. However, it was Dmitry Mendeleev, a university professor in St. Petersburg, Russia, who succeeded in the end. Mendeleev was preparing a textbook on the chemical behavior of different elements when he noticed a potential pattern. Ordering the elements according to this pattern, he unintentionally managed to systemize them according to their atomic number, which is the number of protons that an individual element has. Mendeleev's model also grouped elements with similar properties, such as helium and neon, in the same column. This newly formulated table achieved more than just helping to standardize the way scientists ordered and studied the elements. Mendeleev's table revealed gaps in the pattern, allowing scientists to predict and search for undiscovered elements. The soft silver metal gallium was discovered in 1875, and the number of elements in the table has since grown from the original 63 to the 118 we know today.
Let's take a look at the title first, guys. Probably our listeners aren't aware of this, Tom, but in the title it says, it's elementary. That's actually part of a very famous phrase from some books written about Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective. And he would always turn to his assistant, Dr. Watson, and say, it's elementary, my dear Watson. So that's where part of this title comes from. It's kind of cute. It's elementary or very easy to understand. The story behind the periodic table. We've already told you what the periodic table is. Let's talk about some of the elements of the periodic table or the parts of it and its history. It's very interesting. A lot of this stuff I'd never heard before. Now, without the 118 chemical elements, absolutely nothing would exist in our world. So that chart or table includes everything that exists in our world. So, of course, most of us see the periodic table as an academic headache. Why is it an academic headache? Because it's something we typically have to learn and memorize so that we can score better grades on our tests, our chemistry tests. So it's something all of us have spent hours trying to memorize. I don't think there are any kids out there who have had chemistry that didn't have to memorize the periodic table.
Yeah, and of course, the thing that's hard about it is that they have these abbreviations for the elements. And so H, of course, is hydrogen, He is helium, etc., etc. But then you get some weird ones like Fe. How is that iron?
I was going to say that's iron.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, though. Doesn't iron start with an I? But
I don't know.
The abbreviation for it is Fe. And I think the one for silver is different, too. They're all kind of weird, so you have to memorize those. Then you have to memorize their atomic numbers and their place on the sequence and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it can be a headache trying to memorize the periodic table. You got to memorize it ahead of final chemistry exams, which means you have to be able to remember what it was. Sometimes, of course, you might be required to memorize a poem. For example, I think I had to memorize some Robert Frost poems when I was in elementary school.
Sure.
To memorize them so that you could recite them to the teacher without looking at a piece of paper. I'm sure lots of people here in Taiwan memorize Tong poems and things like that. So yeah, you'd have to do that before your final chemistry exams. Although my understanding is a lot of chemistry exams allow you to consult the chart that they'll have up at the front of the room.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, if it isn't a particular quiz, for example, a shorter type test on the periodic table, I think on the bigger tests or exams for maybe the whole semester or half of the semester, they should just let you look at the periodic table. There are enough other things you have to learn and know. So here it says, as we mark 152 years since this remarkable creation, that's when it was first created. Let's take a moment to understand the story behind the milestone of modern science. If something's remarkable, it's worthy of commenting on. It's worthy of your attention. It's striking. It's something that people talk about. So if you take a moment, they want you to understand the story behind its creation. We're talking about a milestone. When we talk about milestones, we're talking about just a part of a journey. So if there are milestones, it means you've probably done something significant or learned something significant.
So yeah, this is a milestone in modern science. Yeah, we really need to have this periodic table of the elements and an understanding of nuclear science. And here in the next paragraph it says, to trace the modern periodic table to its origins, we have to go back to the 1860s. So if we want to talk about where this table came from, well, we need to go back to the 1860s, about the time of the American Civil War, although the periodic table was not discovered in America, it was in Russia.
Yeah, which I didn't know until today. It's kind of interesting. So we're going to trace the table back to its origins. We're going to go back in time. And we're going to go all the way back to 1860. Now, this was the middle of a period of rapid scientific discovery. Lots of things were being discovered and learned during this period of time in science. And we had 50 elements that were discovered during that century alone. So during the century of the 1800s, that's what they're talking about. There were 50 elements discovered. Yeah, it must have been an exciting time to live. Although they didn't have a lot of modern medicine, which I'm grateful for today, they did have a lot of excitement happening with the discovery of things like these steam trains and these factories that suddenly had machinery that we didn't have before. And cars were invented, lots of fun things. Well, chemistry had a lot of discoveries as well. We're going to talk about what was discovered and who discovered the elements and Actually, I think it was who organized the elements best. But first, guys, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back to continue talking about the story behind the periodic table.
各位同学，我是 Patrick 派老师。我们今天要讲解的课程是5月份杂志 Unit 15 It's Elementary The Story Behind the Periodic Table 化学老师没告诉你的周期表故事。今天讲解的是文章第一天的部分。先来个随堂测验吧。大家听过 Noble Gas 吗？那么惰性气体呢？ Noble Gas 所指的其实是化学性质相似归类在同一族的6种气体，有氦、氖、氩、氪、氙、氡。这6种气体都不容易和其他元素或者化合物产生反应。好，到此为止。再继续说下去，大家会以为这是科学人杂志的讲解。言归正传，我们对于化学元素有正确认识，才能在现代生活善用不同物质的特性，提高生活便利。而这些知识有很大一部分要靠着元素周期表 The Periodic Table 才能有系统的传递学习。我们透过 Unit 15学到了周期表是哪位科学家创造的，也进一步知道周期表对于科学发现的重要性。我们一起来看看第一天课程的学习重点。首先，请看第一段最后一句 As we mark 152 years since this remarkable creation请同学把 mark 圈起来。mark 在这个句子里是纪念的意思。本句的意思是纪念周期表问世至今152年。老师另外举个例子，2011年日本发生311大地震，到了今年2021年届满10年，我们可以造个句子 This year marks 10 years since the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami。我们知道历史上有很多发明之所以重要，是因为他们解决了当代重大问题或满足需求。比方说21世纪初的智慧型手机满足了民众行动上网的需求。所以接下来我们可以预期文章会告诉我们，周期表之所以重要，是因为它在什么样的时代背景因素之下。第二段的学习重点，请看到第二句 This was the middle of 这个句子。西元1860年代，科学迅速发展，如日中天。现在请大家特别注意逗点之后 with 所引导的补充说明，仅仅在19世纪就发现了50种元素。请同学把 discovered 圈起来。由于 with 是介系词，其后只能是名词，它所引导的补充说明不可以是个子句。这里的 discover 动词必须要做变化。由于这50个元素是科学家所发现的，我们用过去分词 discover 加上 ed 来表示被动，所以说 with 50 elements discovered 加上 ed during the century alone 仅仅在那个世纪就发现了50种元素。以上老师讲解的 with引导主要子句的补充说明是非常重要的文法观念，重点在于后面动词的变化。我们需要判断到底要用主动的 ing 还是被动的过去分词 pp。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue with our lesson, everybody. We're talking about the story behind the periodic table of the elements. Hey, it's elementary. It's easy to understand this. We're talking about who invented the periodic table and the contribution that this person made to science. Now, where we left off, we were talking about the fact that the periodic table was invented in the 1860s at a time of rapid scientific discovery. 50 elements were discovered during that century itself, and several chemists attempted to create a system for organizing the elements so that they could be studied and better understood. So if you are somebody who specializes in chemistry, then you are a chemist. Also, if you're in England and you need to get some medicine, you might go to the chemist's, which is a pharmacy in England there. That's semi-related, but actually a chemist here is a person who specializes in chemistry.
Although a lot of people who study chemistry in college, if that's their major, a lot of them will go on to become pharmacists and work in drugstores or the pharmacy. And like Tom said, if you're trying to find a drugstore in England or the UK, you're not going to want to say, where's your pharmacy or where's the drugstore? You're going to say, where is the nearest chemist? We don't say that in America. A chemist to us is someone who has studied chemistry and maybe works in the industry. Maybe they work in a lab, or maybe they've gone on to become a pharmacist. You know, those pharmacists in these drugstores, they know a lot about chemicals, as you probably would guess, a lot about drugs. So moving on, we've got this guy who is got a Russian name, Dmitry Mendeleev. He was a university professor in St. Petersburg, Russia. And he was the one who attempted to create a system. He wanted to organize the elements. And back then, of course, they had about 50 that had already been discovered. He needed to organize a system so that they could be studied and better understood. Wow, can we group some together? Which elements should come first? Which should come last? Things like that. Those were the questions that he was thinking in his own mind as he came up with a system. And remember, he was a university professor in St. Petersburg, Russia, and he succeeded coming up with a system.
Yep, he came up with a chart, and we're still using that chart today. And again, this is a university professor in Russia. Now, here in the third paragraph, it says, Mendeleev was preparing a textbook on the chemical behavior of different elements when he noticed a potential pattern. So if you study something long enough, you'll notice a pattern. Hey, I see a pattern here. It kind of goes this direction. There are certain similarities between these numbers and those. There's kind of a pattern there. And ordering the elements according to this pattern, he unintentionally managed to systemize them according to their atomic number, which is the number of protons that an individual element has. So that's basically how he decided to organize the elements. He organized them by number, and that number is the number of protons in the nucleus. Say, like hydrogen, of course, has 1 proton, and helium has 2 protons, carbon has 6, etc., etc. Those are atomic numbers. And he did this unintentionally, though. He didn't do it on purpose. He just kind of discovered it by accident.
Yeah, and that's another way to write that. He accidentally managed, you could also use that word, or he unintentionally, he just accidentally, I think that's the best substitute word that you could use there. He accidentally, unintentionally, he didn't even try and it just happened, which is so lucky, isn't it? So he accidentally managed to systematize. So you know the word system. Well, systematize is the verb form of the word system. So he managed to put those different elements into some sort of system. How did he do it? Well, he put them in a system or systematized them according to their atomic number. Tom mentioned several of these elements and their atomic numbers. That's probably one of the things you have to memorize as a kid when you're memorizing the elements. What's their atomic number? So that's the number of protons that an individual element has. And if they have different numbers of protons, they're not the same element. So Mendeleev's model also grouped or put together elements with similar properties, which makes sense. For example, helium and neon, they have similar properties. He put them into the same column.
Yeah, the column to the far right of the table, that's where helium and what was the other one?
Neon.
Neon, right there in the same column there because they have similar properties or similar characteristics, okay? And I remember learning this in high school, why exactly they have those columns there, but it does make sense there, even though I don't really remember the reasons. But yeah, I'm pretty sure all of you are very similar with the arrangement of the periodic table. Well, let's look at the final paragraph here. It says, this newly formulated table achieved more than just helping to standardize the way scientists ordered and studied the elements. So here we've got the word formulate, and that means you basically create something with a method. You have a formula, so you formulate something. You could formulate a new business strategy for your company. You do some market research, and you look at your products, and you look at your market, and you come up with a marketing strategy. You formulate that strategy. You basically create that formula.
Or maybe you're coming up with a new proposal for your boss. You want to formulate your proposal. It doesn't mean to just, throw something together quickly. Typically, you spend some time really thinking about something and you devise it methodically, so you use a lot of time. Usually, you're thinking in terms of patterns and strategies, things like that. So formulate. It's very close to the word formula. We use formulas in math. We also have a formulation. The way things are grouped together, that would be a formulation. Here, of course, it's a verb to formulate or create or devise something like a strategy or proposal, or to even express something in a very systematic way that helps the audience understand what you're trying to communicate. You can formulate your thoughts. Sometimes a speaker will be very nervous and they might say, I'm having a hard time formulating my thoughts or putting my thoughts together in a clear way for the audience. So formulate. Again, it could be that you're putting together a strategy, a proposal, or just trying to express yourself clearly, trying to formulate a way to express what you feel to the audience. So they formulated this table, and it helps standardize the way scientists ordered and studied the elements.
Right, to standardize just means to make a standard that is applicable in all parts of a certain area. I believe it was Qin Shi Huang in ancient China that standardized measurements throughout the Chinese Empire. Some people would weigh fruit differently in the East than they would in the West, or, roads were a certain width in the South and they were different in the North. So Qin Shi Huang standardized those measurements so they were the same all over the all over the country. And that's what happened here. You might have scientists ordering the elements in different ways in different parts of the world. But this standardized this order, the order of the elements. But it achieved more than just that. Mendeleev's table revealed gaps in the pattern, allowing scientists to predict and search for undiscovered elements. So there were gaps there, or spaces, which didn't make sense. And so the table basically allowed scientists to discover new elements. They could predict other elements, and to predict something just means to make an accurate guess as to what's going to happen. Lots of scientists are trying to predict when an asteroid is going to hit the Earth, for example.
Yeah, usually if you predict something, you don't know if it will come to pass or actually happen, but you can kind of look into the future, and with the facts that you have, you can kind of guess what's going to happen, or you could say what the consequences of something are going to be. We have lots of predictions of weather on our TV newscast. They like to predict what the weather's going to be the next day. We use the word forecast to say in advance what's going to happen, but they're actually just predicting things. Hopefully, they get more of those predictions right than not. Now, we've got this element called gallium, which I honestly have never heard of. I'm sure I studied it when I was a kid, but it's a soft silver metal, and it's called gallium, and it was discovered in 1875. And the number of elements in the table has since grown from the original 63 to the 118 we know today. I'm sure back then, in the 1800s, these chemists and scientists must have been so excited to see that there were gaps in the periodic table and that they might be the ones to discover the new elements or the elements that no one had actually put a name to. This is kind of exciting. I get excited, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm sure the ones that discovered the new elements were really thrilled because they would always be known in history forevermore.
But I think they've kind of run out of discoveries there because you can only pack so many protons and neutrons into the nucleus of an atom before they start to break apart. Some of the newer elements can only exist like for a half second or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Before they fall apart. But that's a discussion for another day. But there you have it, the discovery of the periodic table. Now we need to hear from our Chinese teacher.
第二段先交代周期表的时代背景。1860年代，科学发展迅速，急需一套系统归纳已经发现的元素，方便后续的研究。段落最后指出，现代周期表的起源可以回溯到俄罗斯圣彼得堡大学教授 Mendeleev。Several chemists attempted to create a system for organizing the elements so that they could be studied and better understood. 请同学把 so that 画起来，这是一个连接词。老师给大家一个例句，让大家了解这个 so that 连接词的用法。I review what I learned earlier during the day in school before going to bed so that I can reinforce my knowledge. 有的同学学习习惯很好，我在睡前复习当天在学校学过的课程内容，便强化知识。第三段提到 Mendeleev 按照原子序把元素加以排列，而且把化学性质相似的元素放在周期表的同一直行里。请看到第二个句子 ordering the elements 开始，一直到 an individual element has 这边。请同学注意，这里逗点之后的 which 它做非限定修饰，代替的是 atomic number 原子序，也就是每个元素所有的质子数。那再接着，请同学注意 ordering 在这里呢是分词构句，那一样呢主词都是 he。接下来，请同学看到 Mendeleev's model also grouped 这个句子，请把 group 画起来。group 那就是呢把什么东西做分类，放在同一群的意思。第四段提到门德列夫制定的周期表，不只让化学元素归纳起来更有系统，方便理解学习，还有一大好处，就是科学家可以借由周期表的规律，寻找尚未发现的元素，补足空缺。那请同学画起来，就是在 this newly formulated table 这边把 achieve more than just helping to 画起来，就是这个周期表它的功能不只是 achieve more than just helping to， 它不只是帮助科学家排列和研究元素时有标准化流程可以依循，还有别的好处。以上就是我们针对第二天课程内容所做的中文讲解，谢谢大家。
That's it for today, everybody, but please come back and join us next time when we continue to talk about the story behind the periodic table. We do hope you join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.